All right. Welcome, everyone. I am Ashley Sergiatis, the Digital Scholarship Librarian at East Tennessee State University and one of the co-conveners of the Digital Collections Discussion Group as part of ACRL's Digital Scholarship section. My co-convener is also here today, Nashieli Marcano, and we are both excited that you all could join us today for the second part of our discussion group's Lightning Talk series on digital collections in teaching and research. Today's session will focus on the use of digital tools. And the recording of the session will be emailed to all attendees after the session with the slides and transcript. In the spirit of building a more equitable, diverse, and inclusive environment in the DSS community, I would like to take a moment to discuss the Digital Scholarship section's community agreement. As a community, we expect that all DSS meetings will start with this agreement, so it becomes a standard practice. I am now going to read the beginning part of this agreement. The DSS community agrees to frame interactions in DSS spaces and meetings with the following guidelines in mind. We recognize that we will all make mistakes and may unintentionally harm individuals or groups as we engage as a community, but we agree to take responsibility for the results of our words and actions. Today, we have a great lineup of 3 presentations. During the presentations, if you have questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat. Nashieli will be monitoring the chat to make sure that all the questions are addressed as long as the time allows. And as mentioned prior, please choose all panelists and attendees in the chat when asking the questions. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen and allow for Wendy and Alyssa.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for coming. Wendy and I are going to talk about library support for faculty digital projects. At the Digital Scholarship Center at George Mason University Libraries, we collaborate with George Mason University students, faculty, and staff by providing research support to facilitate digital research and teaching across the university in all disciplines. Simply put, we help with data and a wide range of digital methods and tools. DISC assists with finding, accessing, and using data, GIS, geospatial data, and spatial analysis, digital humanities-based methods and tools, research data management and sharing, and quantitative and qualitative analysis. At DISC, we frequently collaborate with Fenwick Fellows. The Fenwick Fellowship Program is an annual award given to a George Mason University faculty member to pursue a research project that uses and enhances the university library's resources while advancing knowledge in the faculty member's area of study. Up to 2 fellowships are awarded per year, and at least one of the projects must specifically align with the library's initiatives in the area of digital scholarship. Many of the Fenwick Fellows have chosen to use Omeka as their digital platform of choice for their project. Omeka is a free and open source web publishing platform created for libraries, galleries, archives, and museums. Omeka Classic was designed for individual projects and educators. Development of Omeka S began in 2012 and offers institutions one point of entry for multiple sites. Our Fenwick Fellows have used Omeka S to great success with their scholarship.
Hi. Thanks, Alyssa. Thanks for coming, everybody. I'll go ahead and talk about our first 2 projects. Dr. Alok Yadav, Associate Professor English, has been collecting information on anthologies of African American writing for a number of years. His Fenwick Fellowship project proposal was for generating a digital searchable database of these collected anthologies. As with all of our projects, we meet with the faculty members to discuss their ideas and to get more information from them so that we can decide how to proceed forward. One thing we discovered at our initial meeting was that Alok's data were contained in Word documents. The first step in the project was getting the information out of the Word documents and into a more structured CSV format so that we can import the data into Omeka. The data he collected was a combination of basic bibliographic information, written descriptions, and book images. The data were in 3 separate Word documents, totaling about 500 anthologies. He was very consistent and meticulous in structuring his documents and entries. With the help of our data services consultant, we are able to use a combination of regular expressions in R to use text patterns to extract and structure the data, convert the document entries to HTML, then to XML, and then to CSV. Once the CSV was checked and validated, our metadata librarian mapped headings in the columns to Dublin Core and to bibliographic ontology descriptors. It was key that we convert the data into a format usable by Omeka. Once all of the converting and importing was completed, and again checked for errors, we moved on to the next steps of the project of uploading and linking images, refining the entry's appearance, refining the theme, and so on. For this phase, we were able to use the fellowship funding to hire students to help with any data entry and cleanup on the Omeka items. With many of these Fenwick Fellow projects, a faculty member also helps out with the work. In the next project, Dr. Jennifer Ashley, Associate Professor of Global Affairs Multimedia Project, the political afterlife of the Chilean plebiscite, pulls together current testimonies from people involved in the plebiscite and contemporary ads for voting yes or no on the October 5th, 1988 referendum that resulted in ending Pinochet's rule. This project was more straightforward than the one I just described in that her resources were ready for the project. There was no need for data conversion. After discussing her project and options for describing and organizing the digital media and considering that she was hoping and also considering what she was hoping the functionality would be, we started with a pilot using Omeka Classic. A prototype of her project was built in Omeka. She was able to demonstrate it at a talk she gave in Chile on the 30th anniversary of the plebiscite. At that talk, she connected with a web developer and a designer team who offered to help her to complete it. We continued building her project in Omeka, but a few months later, it was decided to scrap that platform and to migrate it to a WordPress site. Unfortunately, the university libraries do not have a web designer, and at the time, we did not have a developer devoted to digital projects to help us work through issues with the platforms. Jen was able to use her fellowship funds to hire the developer team to complete her project. Building the project this way gave her the flexibility she needed to fulfill her vision. She continues to stay in touch with us, and we continue to maintain the resources on her early Omeka site. Jennifer is currently a 2020-2021 Roy Rosenzweig Center for History and New Media faculty fellow, where she is working with the center to further develop this project. One of the reasons we highlighted this project for this talk is that it shows the importance of recognizing limitations with what you can do at times. The website that was developed will be archived by the university libraries.
Thanks, Wendy. So I'm going to talk about the next two projects. Dr. Andrea Weeks is an associate professor and the director of the Ted R. Bradley Herbarium. Andrea is a Fenwick Fellow for the 2020 to 2021 academic year, working on the Lord Fairfax Community College Herbarium Specimen Collection and Accession Records project. The goal of this project is to digitize and make accessible a collection of approximately 20,000 herbarium specimens that Professor Robert Simpson collected during the 1970s and 80s throughout Virginia. There are two major components to this project. The first is the digitization of Robert Simpson's notebooks, which is currently being done by a digitization company. These notebooks contain useful metadata on the many specimens Simpson collected. The second is to add the digitized notebooks and accompanying metadata to an Omeka-S installation in order to make these records available to other botanists and scholars. I have been working with Andrea on configuring the Omeka-S installation for her project. And the biggest hurdle we've encountered so far was importing the Darwin Core vocabulary. Darwin Core is a vocabulary standard used for information about biodiversity. Her data was already in the Darwin Core format, and because of the nature of Andrea's project, it was the most logical choice to use. In Omeka-S, users can import a vocabulary from an existing metadata standard source. After unsuccessfully attempting to import Darwin Core several times, and consulting with one of our metadata librarians who has worked with us on other Omeka projects, I posted to the Omeka-S user forums to see if any other users had encountered similar issues. Jim Safley, one of the developers, responded and was able to fix the problem for me. And so after much trial and error, I was finally able to import Darwin Core for Andrea. Once Andrea received a sample of digitized materials, we ran a test import to establish a workflow. The process of creating a workflow is especially important given the amount of items the site will eventually have, approximately 20,000. And because Andrea needs to knit together data from an existing database, the CERNEC portal, with the items that will live on the Omeka-S installation. The CERNEC portal is a consortium of over 200 herbaria in 14 states in the southeastern United States. First, we have to make sure the spreadsheet of metadata from the digitization company is clean. Then we will add the TIFF and JPEG files of the digitized notebooks to our server in order to make the item creation process less time consuming. Next, we import the data into Omeka via the CSV import module. We use the file sideload module to add the JPEG files already uploaded to the server to their corresponding item. We are keeping the TIFF files for preservation purposes. The last part of the workflow involves meshing the data that already exists in the CERNEC portal to the items in Omeka-S. Andrea will send me a spreadsheet with the CERNEC portal data. I use the advanced settings of the CSV import module to append data to existing items in Omeka-S. We are hoping to have the digitized images of the notebooks by mid-May, at which time I will add those specimens as items to Omeka-S. When completed, users will be able to browse the site by notebook or by specimen, as well as perform advanced searches. Samuel Hunecki, another Fenwick Fellow for the 2020 to 2021 academic year, is an assistant professor in the Department of History and Art History. Sam has collaborated with the Special Collections Research Center at George Mason University Libraries to make information about their collection of East German posters more accessible to researchers and students. This collection contains more than 7,000 objects, and the goal of Sam's project is to create a poster database with each poster's metadata, along with an online map of linked posters and an advanced search functionality. A handful of these posters will be digitized and available online. After installing an instance of Omeka-S on library servers, the next step was to work with Special Collections to determine if the existing metadata could be imported into Omeka-S. Luckily, the metadata was contained in an Access database, which we were able to convert to a CSV file. Then I used the CSV import module to add the metadata into Omeka. From there, Sam and his research assistants have worked to perform quality control checks on each of the posters, add subject headings, and map them using the mapping module, which allows users to geolocate Omeka-S items and add interactive maps to site pages. Joy Suh, our geospatial resources librarian, created a web map service overlay of Berlin's city boundaries, as well as the boundaries of East and West Germany, which we added to Sam's installation. Sam and his team have made great progress on his project. There are many advantages to using Omeka-S. The platform is highly adaptable to different disciplines and to a variety of digital projects. While it was initially created for museums, its use has reached beyond its original purpose. There are several modules that help to automate the process of batch adding and batch editing items, including the CSV import and file sideload modules, both of which we have used to great effect. Additionally, the team that created and maintains Omeka are fantastic. They are quick to respond in the forums when help is needed. The biggest disadvantage in using Omeka is how challenging it can be to customize the public-facing sites. There are a handful of themes users can download and use, but it does take time, effort, and experience to further tailor the website appearance. We have been fortunate in the Digital Scholarship Center to be able to work remotely throughout the pandemic. Luckily, the faculty we collaborate with have been more than amenable to Zoom meetings instead of face-to-face meetings. And the screen sharing capability has been highly used during our meetings to share information, answer questions, and work together with the Fenwick Fellows. Ultimately, the collaboration of the Digital Scholarship Center with an array of talented and skilled Fenwick Fellows have led to the advancement of scholarship at George Mason University in the disciplines of English, Global Affairs, Biology, and History. And even more importantly, this collaboration has made research and scholarship more accessible to audiences outside our own university community by virtue of its digital format. Thank you. And we also want to thank all of our student workers and colleagues who have assisted us with these projects. Thank you.
All right, I don't see any questions. Thank you so much for the great presentation. Ashley, I don't see anyone posing questions on the chat. Okay. I think we can move on to our next presentation.
Well, hello, everyone. My name is Mike Wurtz. I'm the head of the Holt Atherton Special Collections and Archives at the University of Pacific in Stockton, California, out here in the Valley. We have obviously lots and lots of collections, but one of the highlights of our collections is the materials of John Muir, who was a famous naturalist around the turn of the century. We have the largest collection of his material. And today I'm going to be talking about how we make his material available specifically to help develop a sense of place and enhance observational skills with students in geology and in history classes. So as I mentioned earlier, John Muir is a famous naturalist, but he's kind of considered the father of the modern conservation movement. He's one of the things that he did really well was he was an excellent observer, and you can see it from his drawings and journal entries and things like that. And he really wrote about nature to encourage people to visit. UOP has an extensive archival collection of his, including about 7,000 correspondence, about 100 of his journals and notebooks, photographs, draft manuscripts, books, and the richest part of this are his drawings. And these drawings can appear in his journals, photographs, they're all over the place. We started putting Muir's material online in 2006. And then probably about 5 years after that, we began to aggressively transcribe his journals and other items that we've got. And then just a quick note. First of all, like everybody on the line here, I'm an archivist. And so my primary responsibility is to share these archival holdings. And when I do judge what's in them, I'm really judging mostly their authenticity. I'm not here to interpret, although I do interpreting, and I've written a book about Muir as well. And I do want to recognize that Muir made some remarkable observations. You know, he's known for his remarkable observations and his desire to preserve the environment. However, we can learn from Muir because he also made derogatory and racist comments as well. And we can learn ourselves to make unbiased observations and express them in appropriate and non-hurtful ways. And this has become very poignant in the last year, especially. And it is very interesting because we've always kind of held up Muir as this amazing observer, but then we find within his own writings that his observations fail at times as well. So yeah, you know, we have all these wonderful drawings of Muir's, and we really found that there's a need to share these. And over the years, we've been talking about creating books and all these other things. And of course, then the internet comes along and we find that this is a great way to share them, and we start putting them online. Specifically, we started with Content DM back in 2006, and it served us very well for years and years. In 2017, there was an opportunity through the library to start a digital repository, an institutional repository, which was extremely expensive, of course. And it wasn't optimal for archives, but we did need to figure out ways to save money in other ways. And so we transferred all of our Content DM materials over to bpress. This actually worked out well in the long run. You know, the best thing about bpress as compared to Content DM is that we had unlimited space for our materials. So we could dump as much material as we wanted to, and we've aggressively been adding materials to our collections. Some of the functionality was not exactly the same, of course. There's some things that work much better in Content DM than they do in bpress, but all in all, it worked out very well for us, and now we use bpress. So one of the really things that I think is super cool about the way bpress is set up is the geolocating, that we can geolocate drawings and photographs and things like that. And as you can see, you could say I am a bit of a Muirdo. Instead of a weirdo, I'm a Muirdo. But I'd imagine some of you have probably done things very similar to this, where you've a famous scene in a movie where you've stood someplace. Maybe you've gone to Winslow, Arizona, and stood on the corner in Winslow, Arizona. And I do this with Muir's photographs and drawings as well. And so I started geolocating them and then getting the longitude and latitude. And then there's actually a place inside of bpress that we could add that information. And this is kind of giving you an idea of how many locations I've geolocated in Yosemite and around. Muir is most famous for his work in Yosemite and the glacial origins of Yosemite. And so this has been kind of a fun project on the side that I've been working on to bolster our collections and add more metadata, specifically location metadata for our drawings. Part of the inspiration for working on this is actually reaches into geology classes. Since 2006, and more specifically since 2012, I've been working with the geology department at the University of Pacific to go on field trips. And this is an opportunity to have students learn about John Muir and some other things that I'll mention in just a moment. And so I've connected with lower division classes like Intro to Geology for California, and then higher level courses as well as week-long field trips to the Colorado Plateau, which is pretty much the area of southern Utah and northern Arizona. And we even have done trips to Scotland as well. And really what I'm focusing on here are two things. I really want to focus on making the students better observers, like John Muir. Maybe not exactly like him, but make them better better observers. But also, I want to instill a sense of place. Now, if you go off and you Google sense of place, you're going to get tons and tons of definitions. I had one definition and it's changed to another. Initially, I was kind of thinking about it, having a knowledge and understanding, or knowledge and interest of the place that you were going, whether the geology or the history of it. Knowing these things before you go can kind of be exciting. Then I kind of morphed into kind of this idea of power of place, and that the past becomes more tangible when you are in that space where something has happened. Now, when I talk about the past, I'm talking about geologically and historic times as well. And now, most recently, I've been kind of working on this new idea of sense of place, where you're adding meaning to space in order to make it a place. Again, it's kind of new that I'm developing, but all these are about getting to the point of getting chills up and down your spine when you're standing someplace where someone has stood in the past, or not necessarily a person has stood, but where, maybe a volcano had blown long ago, to kind of feel that. And of course, I do this through storytelling in the field as well. And one of my favorite stories to kind of help develop the sense of place and become better observers are stories of John Muir's, of course. He was a nature writer. And one of my favorite stories is this one here, where he's in Tenaya Canyon in Yosemite, where he basically says, "A fast, a storm, and a difficult canyon were just the medicine I required in order to shake the life of the city off of him when he comes back to Yosemite after being gone for a while." So I'll tell these stories with the students there, and they will also make drawings and sketches of those same areas. This particular drawing, the one that I have underneath the title there, is looking down Tenaya Canyon. I call this a glacier eye view, looking down Tenaya Canyon. In addition to John Muir's material, we have a lot of material about Japanese American internment during World War II on our collection site too. And I use these in the field as well. And this includes newsletters, it includes photographs, drawings as well, which was kind of interesting. And then this is probably the most interesting part of the collection, is we have a series of letters that very young students, grade school students, were writing back to their teacher here in Stockton. And of course, it's rather heartbreaking as well, including this line here: "I sure miss my pet dogs and things." As you probably know, people of Japanese descent living on the west coast of the United States had to leave their homes and go live in internment camps or move out of the state. And so I can use these too, because we visit sites like Manzanar and Tule Lake, and we'll stop there and students will get a moment to kind of realize what had happened in that space and read these historic documents through the digital aspects of it. And then a little side note, I've used the information that I've gathered specifically with Muir to create a book where, again, it's about developing this sense of place. And I've written this book that has 25 drawing sites of John Muir, and it includes site information, how to get to the place where John Muir made the drawing, a quote of John Muir's, and then a little bit of interpretation by me. And then the other half of this thing I've been mentioning sense of place, but also the other side is becoming good observers. What does it take to become a good observer? And I find that this website by John Muir Laws is a wonderful site. It's really mostly focused on nature, but it can be used for most anything. And this has been a really good cornerstone for the work that I've been doing. No relationship to John Muir, he just has a cool name there. His name is John Muir Laws, and I found this very useful because he really tells you when you're in the field to think about three things. What do you notice? What's the first thing that jumps to your mind? What do you wonder about? What questions do you have when you're in the field? And then lastly, what do these things remind me of? And I'll get a little bit more into that in just a moment. So yeah, the pre-trip planning, this is when we come back or when we're actually in the archives, or we can easily do this online in Zoom or however the classrooms are set up. And quite simply, we have the students search for Muir's drawings inside his collection. So they'll be using bpress, our digital commons, to do that. And the first thing that we do is we actually have them make a drawing of Muir's drawing, so they can kind of build the muscle memory of how to make observations the way John Muir did them. I've done this a number of ways. Sometimes I give them a set images to work with, and other times I will let them search for their own images so they can get some library skills in there too. The next step that we can also do from the classroom or on Zoom is we use Google Earth with VR, and they'll visit that exact same site. And again, they will make a drawing from that. And this is kind of an interesting opportunity to see how Google Earth has interpreted that spot. Remember, this interpretation and observation changes the way that different people see it. Obviously, if you make a drawing in the 1800s by John Muir, it's going to be different than what it actually looks like today. And then lastly, I take them to the site, something that we can't do easily in Zoom, but we can actually go to the site where John Muir made that exact drawing. In this case, it's the you've got North Dome in the background with Washington Column and Royal Arches there. And this is where also the student will, then they kind of have this matrix down there in the corner where they will do the I notice and I wonder, and it reminds me of the Muir's drawing, the Google Earth in VR, and then lastly, when they actually visit the site. And they notice things like human structures are different, and they'll wonder about what Muir wrote with, and then things that'll be remind them is usually food, hard cut cheese or dim sum, or the landscape of Lion King. So here's just kind of an idea of showing you what the difference is in their sketches and getting a chance to observe all the different types of landscape there in those three different ways. And of course, the student evaluations and reports have been glowing. These particular students were on the field trip too, so obviously that's a critical part of it. But you can see that I really want to get into the habit of making sketches when I record things. Is really important that they develop this skill of observing through the process of sketching. And obviously the motivations for me personally were to get Muir's work back into the field, develop a sense of place, enhance those observations, and use our online resources. And the big takeaways was, again, getting the increased use of the archival materials through our website and our bpress instance. So that's how we did it here. Thank you so much. And I see there's some things in the chat, so I will stop sharing and see if I can answer those. Oh, there are no questions, they're just comments. Thank you so much.
Yes, fantastic, indeed, fantastic presentation. Mike, thank you so much. We have no questions yet from the audience. So what we'll do is we'll continue with our next group of presenters, and then we'll have the Q&A session. Thank you, Mike.
Okay, so Cal and I are going to talk about teaching metadata and collection life cycles in the humanities classroom using CollectionBuilder. And before we get started, we'll do some introductions. So I'm Olivia Wikle. I'm the Digital Initiatives Librarian at the University of Idaho, and I'll let Cal introduce himself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Cal Murgu. I'm the Instructional Design Librarian at Brock University in Canada. Just quickly, we'll be talking, Olivia and myself will have two separate parts in this presentation. Olivia will be going over CollectionBuilder all of the kind of technical details as well as the educational benefits for CollectionBuilder. So you'll get a quick introduction to the tool, so you get a foundation to play with afterwards. And then I'll talk about a specific example of applying CollectionBuilder in a humanities classroom. I'll show you the output of that from a student's perspective, and then we'll share the lesson plan with you afterwards.
So CollectionBuilder is an open source tool for creating digital collections that are driven by metadata and powered by static web technology. It's being developed by librarians at the University of Idaho, and it's used in a variety of institutions and contexts right now. But as we said, today we're going to focus on its use particularly as a teaching tool. So at its core, CollectionBuilder consists of three main components, and these are a spreadsheet of metadata, a folder of digital objects, and the CollectionBuilder code template. And all of these combined create a complete digital collection website. So the site contains a number of contextual visualizations that are actually automatically generated from that metadata. And these include a browse page, they include a subject word cloud, a map with item pop-ups and thumbnails, as well as a timeline. And then that metadata is also exposed on the site as a table. It's offered in various downloadable formats and generated into rich machine readable markup in the HTML. The metadata also generates the site's item pages, of course, and allows the collection creators to actually write with the collection. And this means that they're actually embedding collection items such as images or PDFs or videos into their about pages to really be able to tell stories with the data. So when we're using it in the classroom, we usually first have students, curate their digital objects, and then they create their metadata in a spreadsheet, usually using Google Sheets. They then upload their metadata and their objects to the CollectionBuilder GH template that they've copied on GitHub, and we've showed them how to do this. We have a few different versions of CollectionBuilder, but usually for teaching, we use CollectionBuilder GH. The GH stands for GitHub Pages for reasons that will become apparent in just a second here. But this is their template. So they've gone and they've uploaded everything, their objects and their metadata here. And the next thing they're going to do is they're going to edit the template's plain text configuration file. And again, we walk them through this step. And after this, they turn on GitHub Pages, which is going to build out and host their digital collection site for free. So GitHub Pages is building their sites using something called Jekyll, which is a static site generator that builds out all the site's HTML and CSS and JavaScript files completely, actually before the site is made live. So this is in contrast to dynamic sites you might be familiar with, which build web pages on the fly. And this is really what makes CollectionBuilder a static website. So at this point, students are going to customize their visualizations, and they're going to do this using a few additional configuration files. And then if they want to, they can also farther customize the site's CSS or HTML if they choose. And this is really easy to do because the code is accessible. It's right there. It just exists in the repository. And this might be something that the instructor leads them to do. It might be something they're really interested in exploring on their own, but the opportunity is there for them. So lastly, they're going to create their about page, and they're going to do that by writing in Markdown. And they're also going to be able to include those collection items using recipes written in Jekyll's templating language called Liquid, and we've pre-formulated some recipes for them to use to easily just change a few variables and pull in those objects. And this really lets students write about the collection within the tool itself, as opposed to writing about their experience or about the collection using an outside medium, such as Microsoft Word, for instance. So there's several technical benefits to using CollectionBuilder in the classroom. And the first one I wanted to point out is its minimal financial and infrastructural requirements. So GitHub Pages is free, so you're not paying to host the material. But instead of using GitHub Pages, you could also use Jekyll to build out the site's files actually on your computer. This would just require a little bit of downloading and installing software before you get started. But if you go that route, again, since the site's not going to require any server-side processing, you can just take those files and host them on a simple web server of your choice when you're ready to do so. because you're preparing those your objects and your metadata outside of the tool before you upload them, they should be preservation ready, ready to put in your digital archive. And that goes for the static site files too. So as Jekyll generates them, you can just grab those and easily archive them. And then finally, the fact that the site's code is statically generated actually before it's made live also means that there's really very little maintenance or security risks for you to worry about. If you don't edit it for years, your site will probably look outdated, but it's still going to function exactly as it does now. And we think this is particularly relevant to DH student projects because they're often great projects and really worth leaving up, but can be a pain to maintain over time. There's also a variety of educational benefits to the tool, and these range from flexibly teaching technical skills to encouraging those traditional humanistic ways of thinking, and you can really kind of combine these two aspects too, I think. So on the technical side, students are learning transferable data skills, even from something just as simple as editing a metadata spreadsheet. They get a feel for how GitHub works, and they have the option to dive into various web development concepts and languages if they choose, and if the instructor chooses to kind of lead them in that direction. And then because CollectionBuilder as a static web tool is making that code underneath it very accessible, revealing that code rather than hiding it behind a GUI interface, students also have the opportunity to apply their critical thinking skills to the new technologies that they're learning, and this comes along in addition to the sort of traditional DH concepts of interrogating, humanities data that they're interacting with and curating primary sources. So as Cal's going to show you, the flexibility of this tool really allows for the instructor and the students to kind of choose which of these skill sets to focus on, depending on their project, depending on their needs. So I'm going to let him tell you more about that now.
Thanks, Olivia. And thanks, Olivia, for laying the groundwork for what CollectionBuilder is all about. I encourage everybody to play around with it, and I've linked to it in the chat. And thanks, Olivia, for describing all the reasons why CollectionBuilder is a great option, specifically for library instruction, where we don't often get a lot of time. So there are a lot of different components that we need to kind of juggle, including technical, but also pedagogical kind of considerations. And that's what I want to think about and present for the next few minutes. So I want to go over an example of CollectionBuilder in the classroom, and this is specific to a Intro to Humanities classroom at the New College of Florida, which is a small liberal arts college in Sarasota, Florida. So the aim of the assignment was to introduce students, one, to group work, which is kind of rare in humanities classrooms, but also to the digital collection life cycle and all of the kind of subjective implications that are part of that. And also to introduce students to the local museum and archive community, where they will likely have to go to complete their thesis to use the primary sources. In this case, it was the Ringling Archives. As you know, Sarasota is a big circus place. So if you're into the circus, that's a good place to go. So this was not only a technological exercise. Yes, there was a focus on metadata and on some web development, but really the focus of the class and the focus of the assignment was on the critical considerations of digital collection arrangement and what does it mean to create exhibits. And there was kind of an impetus by the instructors of this course to get rid or to move away from the traditional paper assignment. So this served as a really great option. And frankly, it served as a more challenging assignment for the groups we found by the end of the class. So in terms of learning outcomes for this assignment, and I will pass along, we'll share an example of this lesson a little later, but generally we were focused on having students go through the process of describing the challenges of digital collection management by actually experiencing it themselves. Students to identify, arrange, and digitize a discrete collection around specific subjects or themes, which meant they actually had to go to this archive and do some of the work involved in organizing, as well as determining a theme or a subject. Organizing metadata in a Google Sheet, manipulating GitHub repository with edits and commits, and gain this kind of experience in troubleshooting technical problems, which, as many of you know, makes up a large component of our jobs as we work with digital technology. All right, next slide, Olivia, thank you. So in terms of the kind of pedagogical principles behind this assignment, there were three main ones. The first was that this was a humanities classroom, not a web development course or a digital scholarship course. So we had to respect that distinction. So the students were humanities students. They were interested in critical reflection and thematic analysis, not necessarily building websites or wrangling metadata or developing websites. So the focus was on humanities skills and applying critical thinking and humanistic inquiry in this process. So we had to really respect that and think about it. And I'll tell you, students really pushed back on this notion. The second is high touch librarian involvement. A liberal arts college exists for high touch teaching and involvement by faculty, including librarians. And that was the case with this assignment as well. This is not an assignment that you could really get across in a one-shot session or one guest lecture. You do need a little bit more involvement. And while CollectionBuilder is a tool with relatively low overhead, it can still be technically challenging for inexperienced operators. So librarian involvement is key to ensure that the technological environment was straightforward and that to work with groups almost as a consultant to ensure that troubleshooting was taken care of. And finally, this notion of encouraging critical reflection was really key for these students. There's so much to learn in this assignment. You can focus on spreadsheets or wrangling metadata. You can focus on GitHub repositories and versioning. You can learn about Jekyll. You have all these different options. And as Olivia said, you can choose how many of them to implement and how many to leave out. But we intentionally focused on the humanities or humanistic questions that needed to be asked or considered. For example, notions of neutrality, the ethics of display, subjective decisions involved in creating exhibits, etc. So next slide, Olivia. Thank you. I'd love to show you all three of these examples, but we don't have the time today. However, as you could see, students focused on circus-related material, as I said, big circus town, and developed specific thematic titles which describe their exhibition. So beauty and variation, performance and exploitation, and pain and performance. I want to focus on the third group, Bodies and Minds Group 3, Pain and Performance. As you can see, all of the elements Olivia described or mentioned earlier are available here. This is the main page. You have a nice description as well as an opportunity to look at sample items. The material can be organized according to many different things, but you could browse the items. Let's just jump into any one, Olivia, and awesome. The metadata is then translated here on this page. So students see a direct connection between what they did in that Google spreadsheet and how it is displayed in this view. The material is also organized around subjects, which students pick. We could have probably done a better job in describing control vocabularies, but it is what it is. It's also organized around timelines. So kind of the date that the material was created. And as you can see here, sometimes students didn't know exactly. So this is excellent. And then finally, there are other views as well that we didn't get to. And then finally, students were also encouraged to write about this experience as this about page here shows. There's a little essay that goes and describes the kind of the tension points and the challenges that students experience throughout the process. And so finally, I want to share, as promised, the lesson plan itself. Now, I wish I could say that this is completely plug and play. It isn't, because as you can imagine, there's a lot of contextual things that you need to consider. For example, you may not want to use the Ringling Museum. I see people are accessing it, so that's good. You may not want to use the Ringling Museum, but you could work with your local archive, your institutional archive, other community partners. And so I hope that this lesson plan serves as a bit of a foundation for you to build upon. Really appreciate your time. And there are just some people that I'd like to thank here, but they're here, so all good. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Olivia and Cal, for this really cool presentation. I would like to open up the forum for audience members to post their questions using the chat.
Yeah, I'm going to share my screen so you all can see the list of presenters and presentations.
Okay, we have a question from Adrienne. Question to Wendy and Alyssa. Can you discuss the conversion between HTML, XML, CSV? What tools were you using for that? Thank you for your question.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and answer that. And let's see, we did this like, at this point, probably 4 years ago. And I have to say, initially, there was a lot of experimentation and trial and error and testing things out. But essentially what we ended up using, because the document was, Word document was really structured, he consistently used headings throughout the document. So we were able to leverage that. And we used regular expressions to extract the data, the text, and structure it. My coworker, she used R. I'm not sure what package she used. I would have to go back and check my notes. And then at that point, we were able to convert it to an HTML document. And we didn't find, I don't know, we just thought the best way to get it into a CSV form was to then convert it to XML and then convert it to CSV. And all of that was done pretty much using R. There was a little bit of open refine in there also, and a lot of checking for errors. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Adrienne says thanks. We have another question from Tiffany. Thank you, Olivia and Cal, for the CollectionBuilder introduction. If you've worked with Omeka before, how do you find it compares to CollectionBuilder from a pedagogical perspective?
I'll start, and then Cal, you can jump in. I think first of all, the way that we teach it, it kind of gets students learning more skills that can be transferred to other ways of their other parts of their scholarship and career, from learning those data literacies, such as building a spreadsheet. They have the option to kind of jump into that HTML or CSS or JavaScript if they want to, and it's easier, I think, easier to access than Omeka in terms of customizing your site that way. But they're also being introduced to GitHub, which is in humanities classes something that I think students don't really know usually, and they're learning that sort of collaborative style of working that is again transferable to web development on a larger scale. So the way that we think about it is that it's sort of more applicable to a lot of different areas of students' lives. So they're probably not going to create another digital collection. Most of them aren't, but they'll probably create more spreadsheets, and they might go into web development in the future. So that's kind of how I think of it. I think Cal might have some experience too from teaching it at New College, Florida.
Yeah, thanks, Olivia. I'm backing up what you just said. I think I'll just add to that from a perspective of an instructor that is being parachuted in for a limited amount of time. Working with CollectionBuilder was a little bit more straightforward, certainly in setting up the environment for students. If you compare it to something like Omeka, where the infrastructure has to kind of be in place, spinning up instances of Omeka is easy if you're sort of have that already built. But in the context of New College of Florida, with a small kind of library and limited resources, we couldn't really do that at the time. So I found that working with CollectionBuilder was a little bit more straightforward. I wrote about this at the link that I just sent you there, where I call myself a reformed Omeka acolyte. So you could read more about my thoughts there, but I've certainly gone with the static web kind of development for teaching, and not looking back.
Great, thank you. We have a comment from Devin. Good article on static web in the classroom written by Olivia, and Devin is sharing the link. Thank you so much. You guys can take a look at the link and visit the article. We have a question from Michelle. Mike, have you considered collecting the work the students produced and putting them in the IR with links to the Muir materials they used. Showcasing student scholarship would be cool, and you could also be teaching them information literacy skills about the value of information and scholarship as a conversation. This comes from the ACRL's framework for information literacy, which supports these. Thank you for your question.
Yeah, certainly I've considered it. It's obviously IRB and things like that we'd have to start building in and that sort of thing. But I think it's a great idea and something certainly worth exploring with the with my institutional repository person. That's a great question. Thanks.
And we have another question from Lucy. bPress's geolocation is a feature built in?
Yeah, I don't remember all the details. I've kind of gotten to the point in my career that I just kind of like, hey, I have this idea, and I ask someone else to do the work. But yes, the geolocation feature is built in, and you just have to turn it on, and then and it's not that difficult. We've just kind of managed to just do it, and I think the only thing that is a little bit, I'd like to be able to get everything from all collections in one map, but if you want to look at just drawings, you have to go into the drawing database. If you want to look at just drawings that are in journals, and you have to go into the journals databases, or drawings in letters, you have to go to the letter, et cetera. It'd be sure nice to just look at everything on one map, but it's not, that functionality is not there. But I always say yet when I'm talking about this sort of work.
Okay, great. Any other questions?
I actually had a question for Wendy and Alyssa on the fellowship program. Can you speak more about that? Do you think that this will be something that you'll continue to do year after year? Or do you think eventually people would want to do the projects without the fellowship program?
I guess I'll jump in first, Alyssa, if that's okay. Yeah, so I don't know how long the fellowship has been around. The library has been giving out this fellowship award to faculty for a good number of years, at least more than 14 years. I've been working here for 14 years, and I know it's been longer than that. It's been more for just to help with their research, whatever it is. And lately, the proposals, they've been kind of more digital project type proposals. I don't know how long the libraries will continue to fund it. Alyssa, did you want to take, I forgot what the second half of the question was.
No, I just wanted to learn more about it and see
oh yeah,
something that you all I didn't know it was going on for that long. I didn't know if it was something that was short, and this was like a trial, or if you think that people will start to want to do these projects without the fellowship funds.
Yeah, they probably will. I would say, especially with the first two projects we highlighted, those were essentially the first two kind of digital projects we did for people who were awarded this fellowship. And the fellowship is a year. There are other things going on at the university, though, with the Center for Humanities Research that was just established, which is different than the Roy Rosenzweig Center for History and New Media, which is different than a Digital Scholarship Center. We all kind of do slightly different things, but they also are supporting projects too, the new Center for Humanities Research. So I imagine that there will be faculty going there too. I don't know what you think, Alyssa.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, Wendy. And the other thing is it is part of what we do to help folks at GMU, whether you're a student or faculty or staff, if you're interested in pursuing any kinds of project like this, regardless of your funding status, that doesn't really make a difference to us. We're here to help. So yeah, I mean, it would be great if more people came to us and asked for help with these kinds of projects, even if they're not a Fenwick Fellow.
Thank you.
All right, we'll continue with a question coming from Christopher for Mike. Has the International Image Interoperability Framework figured in your thinking for how to make your materials viewable, reusable?
Yeah, thank you, Christopher. I attended a workshop on this last fall, I think it was. And my gosh, that looks like a really awesome thing to do. And I've been trying to figure out how to make that work together We're still trying to figure out, how's it going to work with bpress, and I think there's some costs involved. I can't remember all the details, but it's something that was very attractive, and certainly worth looking into to figure out in the future. So thanks for reminding me that I want to put a little bit more effort into figuring that out again. Thanks.
All right, and we have a question coming from one of our presenters, Cal to Mike. Mike, thanks for your presentation. Can you tell us a little about the context of your teaching? For example, history or geography class, how many sessions?
Yeah, it's a cascade of different ways. Obviously, we do what everybody else here does, and that is our one-offs for different classes, but mostly in the history department. The geology ones are usually not one-offs. Those are more teaching in the field. And, to be candid with you, it started out because I wanted to go on field trips. They needed drivers for the trucks to drive around. It's like, I'll go. And then I figured I could make connections to that. So it's really kind of a number of different ways that I've kind of forced myself into the conversation of getting Muir and of course Japanese American internment in there as well. So, but yeah, I think I usually get on at least one field trip a semester, and then we try to have a session that links with that, not all the time. And then there's like a half dozen history classes that we do. I'm still trying to figure out how to get the historians to do more field trips. So thank you, Cal.
I see so many connections between these presentations, and especially when it comes to having students experiencing history, documenting, and I would imagine the learning curve to understand all the different working definitions now when it comes to digital curation, the technological skills involved, historical thinking. Has there been one particular set of skills that have been more challenging for students? I'm posing the question to all presenters.
I'll jump in real quickly. I think that I feel like there's a lot more to learn. And I think my particular project is still pretty incubational, and I think I can probably learn a little bit about the other presenter. I think what I've learned today from the other presenters might be helpful for me to make it better. But I think that's really, every time I do these projects, I find that there's some little hiccup in technology or something like that that can make things difficult.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just say that, New College of Florida is a very specific place. So liberal arts colleges have small classes. They enable this kind of work to happen a little bit more easily. I'm conscious of that. So for those of you in the room that consistently work with classes with hundreds of students in them, the example that we shared might not work as well. So you'd have to kind of change that around. But for those of you that are working with smaller classrooms, I think CollectionBuilder or static development like that would be a fantastic choice.
All right, well, we're about 2 minutes to 3. So I think since there's no more questions in the chat, we'll go ahead and wrap up. I just wanted to do a quick reminder to everyone that there is one more session with these talks, and the next one is on May 28th, and it will be talking about highlighting a specific digital collection in teaching and research, and we hope that you all can join. I would like to thank all the presenters for giving their wonderful presentations and sharing their knowledge and experiences with us, as well as the audience for your participation. As a reminder, recordings will be available after the session. So just thank you all and have a great day.
Thank you all.